I never imagined that the same person who gave me life would slowly drain it from me piece by piece. From the outside looking in, you'd probably think my life was going perfectly fine. I'm Sarah, 25, independent, employed at a stable job, and handling life pretty well on my own. After my father passed away unexpectedly when I was 17, my mother and I became each other's only family. At first, it felt comforting, the two of us against the world. But slowly, without realizing it, that comfort turned into something suffocating. By the time I was working full-time, I'd taken on all the financial responsibilities. I told myself it was natural. I was young, healthy, and capable. I could handle it. Yet each paycheck vanished quicker than the last, going to rent, utilities, groceries, and those little emergency expenses my mother always seemed to have. One evening, exhausted from a double shift, I walked through our front door to find her comfortably curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Sarah, honey," she said, her voice sweet and casual. "I ran short this month. Can you cover the electricity bill?" A tight knot formed instantly in my stomach, but as always, I managed a strained smile. "Of course, Mom," I said softly, tossing my keys onto the table. She smiled back, grateful but not genuinely surprised. This had become our routine. She returned her gaze to her phone, oblivious to the tiredness weighing down my shoulders and the way my chest felt increasingly hollow with each passing day. Still, each time I felt resentment rising, a familiar guilt followed closely behind, whispering in my ear, "Who sacrificed everything for you? Who raised you alone after your father was gone?" These were my mother's favorite words, quietly weaponized with precision. And every time she said them, my protests died unspoken. One late evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, I sat alone at our tiny kitchen table, trying to stretch my salary across the month. My head pounded as I calculated bills, debts, and groceries. Just then, my mother walked in, wearing a new dress I'd never seen before. I stared at the price tag dangling from her sleeve. She caught my glance and casually hid it. "Oh, this? Just something small to cheer myself up." I bit my lip hard to hold back the frustration, silently turning back to the piles of bills that never seemed to shrink. In that moment, a small voice inside me whispered louder than before, "This isn't right. It can't go on like this." But before I could gather the courage to speak up, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down and saw a message from my older brother, Luke, someone whose presence always made things worse, not better. "Sarah, guess what? Mia and I are moving back home. Can't wait to catch up." I felt the blood drain from my face, a shiver running down my spine. Luke and Mia, always the golden couple, effortlessly successful, perpetually favored. Their return could only mean more pressure, more comparisons, more subtle but piercing judgments about the way I lived my life. My mother glanced over my shoulder, eyes instantly brightening. "Luke's coming home? Oh, this is wonderful news. It'll be just like old times." Her excitement hit me like a slap. Old times meant always standing in Luke's shadow, feeling invisible and inadequate no matter how hard I tried. My heart sank further, dread pooling in my chest. As my mother left the room humming cheerfully, I stared at the message from Luke, feeling the weight of inevitability. I knew that this visit wasn't just a reunion, it was a storm approaching, and I was already bracing myself for impact. When Luke and Mia finally walked through our front door a week later, the whole atmosphere of our home changed instantly. The house was suddenly louder, brighter, and filled with a kind of energy that always left me feeling slightly on edge. Luke greeted our mother warmly, his arms wide open as she practically ran to embrace him. She held him tight, her smile radiant and proud, in a way I'd rarely ever seen directed at me. Then Mia stepped in, stylish and poised as always, surveying the modest living room with barely concealed judgment in her eyes. "Sarah," Mia said, her voice dripping with practiced warmth as she gave me a quick hug. "Wow, you've kept things cozy." I swallowed the sting of her words and offered a polite smile. "Thanks, it works for us." Luke laughed lightly, patting me on the shoulder. "Still holding down the fort, huh, Sarah? Always the responsible one." His words were friendly on the surface, but I caught the hidden edge beneath, a subtle reminder of our roles. Luke as the admired older sibling who effortlessly captured our mother's adoration, and me, the dependable daughter, always quietly carrying the burdens no one else wanted. Dinner that night was tense beneath the laughter and casual conversation. My mother eagerly asked about their lives, hanging on to every word about their travels, new car, and the elegant house they'd bought in the suburbs. I felt smaller with each enthusiastic nod she gave, shrinking further into my seat as they described luxuries I'd never experienced. Then Mia turned to me, eyes sharp and calculating. Sarah, have you ever thought about getting your own place? I mean, you're 25 now. Don't you think it's time? The room fell into an awkward silence. My heart pounded, cheeks hot as everyone's eyes focused on me. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, my mother gently placed her hand on mine, smiling at Mia. You know, Mia, I've actually been thinking about that too. Maybe it's time I moved in with you and Luke. It'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? Her words sliced through me. Shock spread through my body like ice water, freezing me to my seat. Mia quickly masked her surprise, exchanging a quick, meaningful glance with Luke. Absolutely, Mom, Luke said smoothly, his eyes briefly meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It would be great having you closer. My throat tightened painfully. My mother's choice of words echoed in my head, a quiet but powerful betrayal. I'd sacrificed everything: money, comfort, peace of mind, believing I owed her endlessly. Yet in one breath she'd chosen Luke and Mia, effortlessly discarding me. I forced a smile, my voice steady despite the crushing weight in my chest. That's wonderful, Mom. I'm happy for you. Dinner ended soon afterward, everyone retreating to their rooms except me. I stayed behind, mechanically clearing the dishes, my thoughts spinning chaotically. Each plate I washed felt heavier, each movement a reminder of the burden I'd silently carried for so long. Finally, I stepped outside onto the small balcony, the cool night air stinging my cheeks. The neighborhood was quiet, streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. I stood there, breathing deeply, fighting back tears. But in that moment of stillness, clarity settled over me. It wasn't just about my mother choosing Luke or Mia. It was about me, about how I'd allowed myself to be trapped, manipulated, and taken for granted for years. Tonight had revealed the harsh truth I'd always avoided facing. To my family, I'd never been enough. And standing there under the dark, silent sky, something deep inside me hardened with resolve. I'd spent my life trying to earn their approval, their affection, their validation. But I realized clearly now, I was done trying. It was time to reclaim my life, no matter what it took. The days following my mother's announcement felt surreal, like walking through thick fog, unable to see clearly or breathe deeply. Yet, amid the haze of shock and hurt, a quiet voice inside whispered something I hadn't heard in years. Maybe this was my chance at freedom. I knew I couldn't leave without confronting them. So, on a cloudy Sunday afternoon, I gathered the family in our small, cramped living room. My hands trembled slightly as I stood facing Luke, Mia, and my mother, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. My throat felt dry, my heart beat heavy in my chest. I think it's time we clarify a few things, I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. You've all assumed for years that this apartment, the furniture, and everything else were bought with Mom's inheritance from Dad. But the truth is, everything here belongs entirely to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Mia's eyes widened slightly, her polished composure briefly shattered. Luke glanced sharply at our mother, confusion and panic flickering across his face. But it was my mother's expression that hurt the most. She looked genuinely shocked, as if truly seeing me for the first time. What do you mean, Sarah? She asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, summoning all my courage. I mean, all these years I've been working 2 jobs, covering every bill, every meal, every emergency you had. There never was any inheritance, Mom. You used it up years ago. Mia's jaw tightened as she shot Luke an accusing look. He opened his mouth to speak, but then quickly closed it, realization dawning slowly on his face. You're kidding, right, Sarah? I shook my head, the weight of years finally lifting from my shoulders. Not at all. I kept quiet, hoping one day you'd all see the truth, that I was more than just someone to rely on. But clearly, that was my mistake. The room grew tense, heavy silence filling every corner. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice quivering. Sarah, why didn't you ever say anything? Why would you hide this? I met her gaze, sadness mingling with a newfound strength. Because every time I tried, you'd remind me how much I owed you for raising me. I believed it. I believed I had to pay you back for something that was never meant to have a price. Luke stood suddenly, pacing anxiously. This changes everything. We can't support Mom financially right now, Sarah. You thought you could just step in and reap the benefits without asking questions, I finished calmly. But now you know there are no benefits, just responsibilities you've avoided. Mia's eyes darted anxiously between Luke and our mother, her polished mask slipping entirely now. We need to reconsider this. Sarah, you're not just going to abandon us now, are you? I paused, the question lingering in the air, thick with years of manipulation and entitlement. It would have been so easy to give in, to step back into the role I'd always occupied, responsible, quiet, and endlessly giving. But something had irrevocably shifted inside me, a truth that resonated deeply. I didn't owe them anything more. No, I finally said, my voice steady, resolute. I've done more than enough. It's time you all learn to manage on your own. They stared at me, disbelief and panic etched clearly across their faces. But I turned away, walking quietly toward my bedroom to pack my things. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Luke's voice trembling in frustration, Mia's sharp tone rising in anxiety, and my mother's quiet sobs. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilt, just relief. A few hours later, with my bags packed and keys in hand, I stood at the apartment's threshold one last time. My mother sat silently on the sofa, eyes red from tears, but face resigned. Luke and Mia hovered anxiously nearby, their confidence shattered, realization sinking in that their easy path had just vanished. I genuinely hope things get better for you, I told them softly, meaning every word, but it won't happen at my expense anymore. Stepping outside, the fresh air hit my face, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and distant rain. My chest felt lighter, as though I'd shed years of invisible weight. Despite the uncertainty ahead, a quiet sense of possibility stirred within me. For the first time in my life, I was truly free, and ready to discover who I was without them. Leaving the apartment felt exhilarating at first. The fresh autumn breeze on my face, the quiet sense of possibility ahead. Freedom tasted sweeter than I imagined. But after checking into a small, sparsely furnished studio across town, reality quickly settled in. The room was quiet, too quiet, filled only by the hum of a mini-fridge and my anxious thoughts bouncing off bare walls. At first, relief still lingered, yet as days passed, loneliness crept in, wrapping around me like a cold, heavy blanket. Guilt followed close behind, whispering familiar doubts. Did I do the right thing? Was I selfish for walking away? Each night, these questions kept me awake, replaying old conversations and second-guessing myself. One evening, while mindlessly unpacking a box, I found an old photograph tucked between my books. It was a faded picture of me and my mother, taken on a family vacation years ago. Her smile was bright and carefree, a version of her I'd long forgotten. The image tugged painfully at my heart, reminding me of moments I desperately clung to, even as they slipped away. Tears blurred my vision, and for the first time since leaving, I allowed myself to cry. Realizing I couldn't face these feelings alone, I reached out to Rachel, my best friend since college, someone who had survived similar family turmoil. Rachel arrived within half an hour, her comforting presence instantly filling the empty space of the studio. She pulled me into a gentle hug, understanding without words as I quietly sobbed against her shoulder. When I'd finally calmed down, she sat beside me, listening intently as I poured out years of pain, frustration, and guilt I'd carried silently. Rachel never interrupted, never judged. She simply offered the warmth of her presence. I just can't shake this feeling that I'm abandoning them, I admitted, my voice raw. Maybe I owed them more. Maybe I should have. Rachel gently interrupted, placing her hand firmly on mine. Sarah, you spent years giving everything to people who barely saw you. That's not family, that's exploitation. Trust me, I know. Her words hit deep, resonating with something I'd sensed but never dared to voice. Rachel had survived a toxic family herself, and I trusted her experience deeply. How did you cope, Rachel? How did you move past it? I asked, my voice small, vulnerable. She sighed softly, her eyes reflecting hard-earned wisdom. Honestly, it was difficult, but the key for me was learning to separate love from obligation. Real love shouldn't drain you or break your spirit. Real love lifts you up, it doesn't weigh you down. We spent the evening sharing our experiences, each story helping me unravel the complicated emotions I'd buried for so long. Rachel's presence felt like a lifeline, steady and reliable amidst the storm. Before leaving that night, she wrote down the contact information of her therapist. Please, Sarah, Rachel urged gently, her eyes earnest. Promise me you'll talk to someone professional. You deserve to heal. Her concern touched me deeply, and I nodded sincerely. I promise. Over the next days, Rachel checked in regularly, sending encouraging texts or dropping by briefly with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery. Each visit brought a little more warmth, gently eroding the isolation that had settled around me. Her kindness reminded me of something crucial, that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was strength. With Rachel's encouragement, I finally made the call to set an appointment with the therapist she'd recommended. My heart raced anxiously as the phone rang, but the moment a calm, reassuring voice answered, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to face the past and reclaim my life. As I ended the call, standing alone in my small studio, I realized something had shifted inside me. The loneliness and guilt hadn't disappeared entirely, but now I felt less trapped by them. For the first time in a long while, I believed I could find my way out, and that realization felt like the beginning of something powerful and new. Just as I began finding my footing, the messages started flooding in. My phone buzzed constantly, lighting up with my brother's name, my mother's anxious pleas, and Mia's subtly manipulative texts. I hesitated at first, torn between curiosity and dread, finally deciding to check the messages after another sleepless night. Luke's message appeared first, blunt and guilt-laden. Sarah, Mom hasn't stopped crying since you left. Don't you think you've proven your point? Come home and fix this. The accusation stung like salt in a fresh wound. Mia's text followed, cloaked in a passive-aggressive tone. Sarah, we're all struggling here. It's heartbreaking watching Mom suffer because of your choices. But it was my mother's voicemail that shook me deepest. Her voice was frail, shaky, carefully wrapped in vulnerability. Sarah, please. I never thought you'd actually leave me. I'm your mother. Don't I deserve better from you? Each message felt designed like a precise arrow, aimed straight at my weakest points. Guilt crept back in, whispering softly, tempting me to surrender. Was I cruel for stepping away? Had I misunderstood them, overreacted somehow? For a brief moment, old doubts threatened to engulf me. Yet something inside, perhaps that quiet strength Rachel had ignited, stirred, gently nudging me toward clarity. Remembering her advice, I decided to reach out, seeking perspective before responding to my family's emotional avalanche. Rachel listened carefully as I explained each message, nodding in understanding. After a thoughtful pause, she calmly replied, Sarah, this is exactly what emotional manipulation looks like. They're trying to trigger your guilt, making you question your decision. Recognize it for what it is. I took a shaky breath, absorbing her words. I know, but it's still hard. They're my family. Her eyes softened compassionately. Family shouldn't be the people who intentionally hurt you. You're learning to protect yourself. Don't lose sight of that. You can't heal by returning to the environment that broke you. Rachel's steady reassurance resonated deeply, bolstering my resolve. With newfound clarity, I chose to reply, typing slowly, deliberately, ensuring my words held the boundaries I'd worked hard to create. Luke, Mia, Mom, I hear your pain, but I've given everything to support and protect you all these years, often at the expense of myself. It's time you understand and respect my choice to care for myself. I genuinely hope you find strength and peace, but I can't be the source of your comfort anymore. And I hit send, feeling a mix of fear and pride flooding through me. Minutes passed, the screen silent, offering a moment of fragile relief. But within hours, new messages appeared, now sharper, more desperate, each one testing my determination. My mother sent a voicemail, her voice trembling with carefully constructed vulnerability. Sarah, please reconsider. You're punishing me unfairly. How can you be so selfish? That word, selfish, hung heavy, a label she'd weaponized often in the past, effectively silencing me. But now, hearing it again felt different. Instead of shame, I felt anger rising, a righteous indignation at the emotional blackmail I'd endured silently for far too long. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat quietly, reflecting deeply on Rachel's words. Over the next days, as the messages continued, increasingly manipulative and frantic, I resisted the urge to respond. The temptation to reassure, to soothe their anxiety, still tugged at me, but I stood firm, remembering each painful moment I'd sacrificed myself for their comfort. Slowly, a profound realization settled inside me. Their desperation wasn't born out of love. It was panic from losing control over me. They weren't mourning my absence. They were mourning the loss of their convenience. Understanding this truth brought a bittersweet sense of freedom. Finally, on a cold, clear night, I silenced my phone, allowing myself the quiet space to breathe without constant emotional interference. Standing alone by my small studio window, gazing out at the city lights below, I realized I'd done something I never thought possible. I'd chosen myself, my peace, and my dignity, even under immense pressure. I knew this battle wasn't over, but I also knew something far more important. This time, I'd discovered a strength within myself that no message, no manipulation, and no guilt could ever take away. Stepping into my therapist's office for the first time, my heart fluttered nervously in my chest. The room was calm and warmly lit, decorated simply with soft colors and comfortable chairs. Dr. Co. Bennett greeted me with a reassuring smile, her presence immediately calming some of the anxiety twisting inside me. "Sarah, I'm glad you're here," she began gently. "What brings you in today?" I hesitated for a brief moment, unsure how to put years of complicated emotions into words. But seeing the genuine warmth in her eyes, I felt a sudden urge to finally let go of the burdens I'd silently carried. "I've spent most of my life trying to keep everyone happy, especially my family," I began slowly, my voice quiet but steady. "But it's become suffocating. Recently, I made the hardest decision to walk away. Now I'm struggling with guilt, doubt, and honestly, I'm not even sure who I am outside of them." She nodded softly, listening intently without interrupting. Her calm, focused presence made it easier to keep going, so I did, unraveling years of emotional complexity. I told her about my mother's subtle manipulations, the constant guilt trips, Luke's entitlement, and Mia's quiet condescension. I spoke about how I'd learned to stay silent, absorbing their demands without complaint, always believing I owed them my loyalty and support. Dr. Bennett gently asked, "Sarah, can you remember the first moment you felt responsible for your family's happiness?" The question caught me off guard. Memories flashed vividly: my father's sudden passing, my mother's quiet sobs at night, Luke's detachment. "After Dad died," I whispered, my voice shaky. "I was just 17, but suddenly I was taking care of everything. Mom couldn't cope. Luke was already distant. I stepped into the void because no one else would." "That must have been incredibly heavy for someone so young," she said, her voice gentle with understanding. Tears filled my eyes unexpectedly, emotions long buried now bubbling to the surface. I didn't know it then, but it set the pattern for everything afterward. I believed if I didn't hold things together, they'd all fall apart. Dr. Bennett leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest and compassionate. "Sarah, that's an enormous responsibility you took upon yourself, one that never belonged to you in the first place. It's understandable you've struggled so deeply with guilt. You've equated loving them with sacrificing yourself entirely." Her words resonated powerfully within me, something clicking quietly into place. I've always felt selfish even thinking of myself. Every time I tried, their voices reminded me I wasn't allowed. "But you are allowed," she said firmly yet gently. "You deserve kindness and care as much as they do. You've never been selfish, only human." Her words lingered, slowly seeping into spaces within me that had felt dark and empty for too long. In that moment, I glimpsed the possibility of a different life, one where my worth wasn't measured by how much I gave away. Over the next several weeks, each session brought new revelations. We carefully unpacked my past, confronting painful memories and harmful beliefs I'd internalized deeply. Dr. Bennett introduced strategies to help me set clear emotional boundaries, teaching me how to respond without absorbing others' feelings and expectations as my own. I began journaling nightly, recording my thoughts, fears, and small victories. Gradually, I noticed changes, small but significant. My guilt started loosening its grip, replaced slowly by quiet confidence and a new sense of self. Decisions became clearer. The constant anxiety I'd carried began easing, making space for peace I'd never thought possible. One evening, after another session filled with breakthroughs, I stood alone by my studio window, gazing out at the city lights twinkling gently beneath a starless sky. The reflection staring back at me from the glass looked different somehow, stronger, freer, more alive. For the first time, I recognized myself not as someone defined by others, but simply as Sarah, a person worthy of love, respect, and kindness. The road ahead remained uncertain, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear: my identity and happiness no longer needed their approval or validation. And standing there, quietly embracing this newfound freedom, I realized I'd finally begun the true journey of healing and reclaiming my life. Several months had passed since I'd last heard from my family. I'd settled into a rhythm, carefully crafting a new life, a quiet, simple routine filled with therapy sessions, afternoons in cozy coffee shops, and late-night walks beneath city lights. The constant heavy ache in my chest had slowly transformed into something softer, more manageable. Yet the memory of what I'd left behind still lingered, like faint echoes from another lifetime. Then one crisp afternoon, while standing in line at a busy grocery store downtown, I heard familiar voices behind me. My heart skipped uncomfortably as I recognized them: Luke's sharp tone, Mia's impatient sigh, and finally, my mother's weary voice gently asking for help. Slowly, I turned around, coming face to face with the people I'd worked so hard to distance myself from. They seemed startled to see me, their faces registering surprise, confusion, and perhaps even a hint of shame. My mother appeared thinner, more fragile somehow, her eyes tired beneath dark circles. Luke's confidence had dimmed significantly, replaced by a nervous hesitation, and Mia looked far less composed, frustration etched visibly across her features. For a brief, tense moment, no one spoke. I felt emotions rise sharply: hurt, anger, sadness, but I steadied my breathing, drawing on months of hard-earned emotional strength. "Sarah," Luke finally began, his voice unusually tentative. "It's been a while. We've missed you." I offered a polite, gentle nod. "Yes, it has." My mother stepped forward cautiously, her hands trembling slightly. "Sarah, dear, you look... well, I've been hoping we'd talk eventually. Things haven't been easy, you know." Her voice carried a familiar tone, a subtle attempt to trigger the guilt I knew too well. Yet this time, something inside me shifted calmly, grounding me firmly. "I know things haven't been easy for any of us," I replied softly, my tone gentle but clear. "I hope you're managing." Luke exchanged anxious glances with Mia, clearly uncomfortable. Mia spoke up, her voice falsely sweet, yet edged with urgency. "Sarah, we've all been struggling, especially Mom. Maybe you could..." Before she could finish, I raised my hand slightly, gently interrupting. "Mia, I truly wish you all the best, but I can't step back into the role I used to play." My mother's eyes widened in surprise, her voice suddenly weaker. "Sarah, we really need you. You can't just turn your back." "I'm not turning my back," I said softly, firmly. "I'm just taking care of myself for the first time. And you know what? It's something I should have done years ago." Luke looked genuinely confused, frustration rising slightly. "But your family, doesn't that mean something?" I took a slow, steady breath, meeting each of their eyes. "Family should mean love, respect, and mutual support, not control, manipulation, or dependency. I'm sorry, Luke, but I refuse to continue sacrificing myself to fulfill unhealthy expectations." My mother looked stunned, as though genuinely seeing me for the first time. Her eyes glistened with tears, but this time I felt no urge to rush in and fix her discomfort. "You all have each other," I continued gently. "Maybe this is your chance to learn to support one another in healthier ways." A heavy silence followed. Around us, shoppers moved quietly, unaware of the quiet drama unfolding. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice trembling but more sincere than I'd ever heard before. "Sarah, I've made mistakes. I don't fully understand your choices yet, but maybe someday I will." I nodded softly, a gentle acknowledgement. "I hope so, Mom. I really do." Before leaving, I looked at each of them, recognizing clearly that their struggles were no longer mine to carry. My chest felt lighter as I turned away, walking steadily toward the exit, their eyes burning softly into my back. Yet as I stepped outside, the fresh air filled my lungs deeply, carrying a sense of quiet, powerful relief. Standing there beneath the pale autumn sky, I knew something profound had happened. I'd faced the past calmly, clearly, and firmly. I'd set my boundaries, clearly communicated my worth, and finally freed myself from years of emotional chains. The road ahead might still be uncertain, but for the first time I felt genuine hope, not based on external approval or validation, but rooted deeply in my newfound strength and self-respect. As I walked away from the store, each step felt lighter than the last, the distance between me and my family widening both physically and emotionally. My heart still raced slightly from the unexpected encounter, yet there was a calm clarity emerging, replacing the old anxiety that once defined me. That evening, I found myself sitting alone by my window, watching dusk settle quietly over the city. The gentle hum of traffic below became comforting white noise as I reflected on everything that had brought me to this moment. The journey had been painfully difficult, filled with choices I'd never imagined making. Yet here I was, still standing, stronger than I'd believed possible. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Opening the door, I found Rachel standing there, her familiar smile warm and reassuring. She held up 2 cups of steaming coffee from our favorite cafe, silently inviting herself inside. I heard about your little reunion, she said softly, handing me a cup as she sat comfortably across from me on the sofa. Are you okay? I took a deep breath, offering a small smile. Honestly, better than okay. It was hard seeing them, but it felt different. I wasn't afraid or unsure this time. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. That's growth, Sarah. Real healing isn't about never feeling pain again. It's about knowing you can face that pain without losing yourself. Her words resonated deeply, reinforcing the quiet pride that had been building within me since that afternoon. You were right, Rachel, I admitted softly. I never realized how much I needed to create boundaries until I finally did. She grinned gently, her eyes shining with genuine affection. I always knew you had it in you. You just needed the space to discover it yourself. Over the next few weeks, that realization continued unfolding in subtle yet profound ways. I noticed myself making decisions easily without the lingering guilt that once held me captive. Simple acts, like choosing what to eat, how to spend my weekends, or even saying no to unnecessary obligations, felt refreshingly empowering. One morning, while walking through the local park, I received another message from my mother. This one felt different, devoid of the usual manipulative undertones. Sarah, I've had time to reflect, and I realize I've made so many mistakes. I don't fully understand everything yet, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I hope someday we might rebuild something healthier. Until then, please take care of yourself. I'm proud of you. Reading her words, a quiet warmth spread through me. For the first time, my mother's acknowledgement felt genuine, no longer tied to expectations or guilt. I replied simply, sincerely, Thank you, Mom. Take care of yourself too. As I put away my phone, I felt a subtle sense of closure. Perhaps we wouldn't reconnect fully right away, maybe we never would, but now there was the possibility of a healthier relationship, built on respect rather than dependence. Time continued moving forward, gently carrying me into new chapters of self-discovery. With each passing day, I embraced the reality that my worth didn't depend on approval, validation, or sacrifice. My identity was mine to define, shaped by my own choices and values, not the expectations of those who had never fully understood me. Late one quiet evening, as I sat at my small desk journaling by lamplight, I realized something remarkable. The story I'd been writing was no longer one of pain and sacrifice, but one of courage, self-respect, and quiet strength. I had become the author of my own life, and the pen was finally firmly in my hands. Glancing toward the window again, I noticed the city lights shimmering softly in the darkness, steady and beautiful against the night sky. A deep, calm breath filled my lungs, carrying a gentle gratitude for everything that had brought me here. Every struggle, every lesson, every boundary learned. My journey was far from finished, yet for the first time in my life, I felt genuine excitement rather than fear about the future. I understood now that true happiness wasn't about perfection or easy solutions. It was about knowing yourself deeply and honoring your worth, even when it was difficult. Closing my journal softly, I whispered quietly to myself, feeling the strength of each word resonate deep within my heart. I'm finally free. Finally,